I made this PCB for a previous breadboard project. It's my first one and it's probably awful in the eyes of an expert, but hey, it works. It was challenging to discover the end-to-end process. There's good material about each step, but not that much about the big picture. I'm making this video to show that big picture and some essential vocabulary you'll encounter. This is not a detailed step-by-step tutorial. Creating a PCB from scratch was super fun. The design phase was time-consuming, but a fun puzzle. And the best part, ordering and receiving the boards from the factory was both affordable and quick. I will show you my PCB without worrying much about what it does. I have a fresh one here with no components, and I have a different PCB here already assembled from a product I bought. What's a PCB for? Previously I had built everything on solderless breadboards, and the PCB replaced the internal breadboard connections and the extra wiring, providing a more permanent and reliable solution. But its function doesn't end there. The PCB provides structural support. It's made of a synthetic, very tough material that it's also electrically insulating to avoid shorts, and it's heat resistant to allow soldering on top of it. I had to decide the thickness and the shape. I took a boring approach and went for a rectangle, but you can get it cut in any other shapes. When the PCB is meant to be visible, as in many hobbyist projects, you have the freedom to add design elements like rounded corners or unusual custom shapes. Larger PCBs will be more expensive, and if you use funny shapes, you will be charged for the bounding rectangle. You can also drill holes for screws, spacers, and so on. This one also has some holes where a few components will be placed. You can see the light shine through them. Choosing the thickness is a trade-off between toughness and weight. Anything either too thin or too thick will be more pricey. This one is 1.6 millimeters, which is the cheapest and default size provided by my manufacturer. Instead of wires like the breadboard, you'll design a pattern of copper lines to be etched on top of the board core. These lines here are called traces and act like wires. Traces are the most delicate part of the PCB and can easily be damaged by scratches. Manufacturers will ask you to choose a weight, which means the thickness of the traces. The default, 1 ounce, is fine for most digital hobbyist projects. If you need more, you probably know. On a breadboard, wires can be insulated, but in a PCB, two traces that touch each other are connected, which makes the design harder. A solution is to have traces on both sides of the PCB. Each side is called a layer. Traces in the top layer are insulated from traces in the bottom layer, but you can connect them by adding holes plated in copper called vias. You can see them as tiny dots here that reappear on the other side, with the hole edges plated in metal. It's even possible to manufacture a PCB with more than 2 layers. Typical numbers are 4 or 6. These are roughly made as multiple PCBs stacked with other boards containing extra vias and glued together. In that case, vias can either go through the whole PCB sandwich or connect a few layers. Some vias will be completely invisible from the outside. Usually you'll keep all the components on one of the outer layers, and the rest will only have traces and vias. Some traces can be made a bit thicker. That's common for lines that transmit power. I did that for this BCC trace here, which is wider than the other traces. But you can go beyond that and use a large flat surface of copper to connect things. as you can see in all these large light colored areas. Doing so is a widespread practice. It's called a ground field. Field is the name of these large copper areas, and this one is connected to the ground. They help absorb noise and make power more stable. Another function of a PCB is providing support for mounting components. In the breadboard, I'd use components called through-hole, the ones with insertable pins. On the PCB, through-hole components are placed into plate-through holes, like these ones or these ones. Plate-through holes will go through all your layers and are easy to hand solder with an iron. Many components, especially smaller ones, come in what's known as SMT, which means surface mount technology. SMT components, called surface mount devices or SMD, are soldered not directly on the trace, but on larger metallic areas like this. These soldering points are called solder pads or just pads. The solder sticks to metal. If you have a pad next to an unrelated trace, it will be easy to accidentally short them together. So the areas that don't need soldering are called by a layer of epoxy paint that will protect the traces, insulate them, and repel stray solder. Only the pads and the through holes will be left exposed for soldering. This layer, called the solder mask, also gives the PCB its color. You can choose with color, and green is the most common, but you can see this one is red instead, and there are a few choices. That part is purely aesthetics. Finally, a PCB can help you with assembly. That means soldering the components to the PCB, and when doing that, you need to know which component goes where. The easiest way is to just print it on top of the board. On the PCB, this white print is called the silkscreen. Again, you must provide its design. You can put a reference to the components like R1, R2, R4, or in some cases you may prefer to just put the component values, like this 100 nanofarad capacitor here. You can also add labeling to identify the board or indications about what different connector pins are, or what each indicator represents, or what each dip switch is going to be used for. And a PCB can do other advanced things like having traces that act like radio antennas or touch sensors that I won't discuss here. Great, so how do you go about this? You must describe the board's shape and size, traces and fields, solder mask, silkscreen, drilling patterns, vias, etc. There's specialized software that will assist you with this. This software category is called EDA, short for Electronic Design Automation. There are a few options, but you probably want one of the free ones as a hobbyist. Many people talk well about easy EDA, but I prefer open source licenses, so I've used KiCad 7. Still, for this overview, you should find that the rough steps are the same. The first step is to design the schematic for your circuit. I'll assume that you already have a working design. In the schematic, you are not worried about the physical PCB, just the functionality of your circuit, its components, and how they connect. Each component in the schematic has a graphical representation called a symbol, which, besides a picture, indicates the device's pins and their names. Once you choose a symbol, you can put as many as you want in the schematic and add a reference, a unique name for each physical component. For example, you can call several resistors R1, R2, R3, etc. For each component, you will also set a value, whatever data you need to understand which specific variant for the components. For resistors, you probably will pick the amount of ohms, but perhaps also how many watts. For an IC, you may want to include the specific manufacturer and variant. It's primarily up to you, but if you put helpful information, it will make it easier to lay out the PCB later. Your EDA comes with a library with symbols for popular components. But sooner or later, you'll find that there isn't a symbol for some component you want to use. You can download and install symbols in your library. I had to search for a symbol for this ROM chip, and there was one, but I was not too fond of it. It was drawn in a way that reflects the physical chip, which is not the best for schematic. This ROM has some address lines on one side and some on the other, and they are not numbered consecutively, which will make the schematic messy. So I edited the one provided using a symbol editor that KiCad offers to make it more sensible. Components in the schematic are wired together, and your EDA will provide a way to do this. You can also bundle multiple related wires as a bus to simplify the drawing, but this thick line still represents multiple independent wires next to each other. After wiring the schematic, you will have specific pins of your components connected to each other by wires. Given that the shape of the wire doesn't matter much, the EDA defines something called a net as a set of pins that should all be wired together in some way. Your whole circuit can be described abstractly as a collection of components and a list of nets called a netlist by people in this field. There are a few nets that you'll most likely have: your ground net and your power net. That one will typically be 5 volts or 3.3 volts. Occasionally, you could have both, with a net for each one. Every single IC with a ground connection or grounded input will be attached to a ground net. You usually add these special symbols for ground or power connection. They will all have to be physically connected in the PCB, so they get put in a massive net. At this point, you have an abstract schematic and the work related to the physical design begins. The first step is still done from a schematic editor in KiCad, and it involves telling the software how each component will be attached to the PCB. To do so, you need to provide a footprint for each component. A footprint describes the physical layout of the pads or plated holes required to solder the component. It also specifies a clearance area to prevent the part from overlapping with other parts. Footprint selection is not automatic based on the component because many come in different packages. A 555 timer could come in this 8-pin PD package or a small outline IC8. Even a simple through-hole resistor could have a footprint where the through-holes are far apart and you install it flat against the PCB, or you could have closer holes and install it standing up, like this. There is still a choice even for components like these SMD resistors, which come in very standard sizes. You have two footprints here, one of which will get you oversized pads that are easier to hand solder. That's what I chose. I'm terrible at soldering. After assigning footprints, you're ready for layout. This uses a PCB editor tool that can be asked to sync with the schematic. It will dump all the footprints on the PCB drawing, making it look like they just fell out of a bag, and then you can carefully place them. Layout is a bit of an art. Sometimes there's common sense that you can follow, like putting the component with many interconnections next to each other, but the solution is not always obvious. The EDA will show these thin lines, telling you these two things are in the same net, which can help a bit. If you have a rough layout, you can add lines in the edge cuts layer, which defines the outer shape of the PCB. At this point, you can add any support holes. Those are placed as an extra footprint that isn't related to any component. Having your boundaries will help you know where your traces can go. You can always make later adjustments. After the layout, you can start the routing. Like the layout, this is also an art. The EDA will guide you to avoid crossing lines that shouldn't connect and sometimes finding paths. You'll have to draw traces until every net in your netlist is appropriately connected. You can insert VS to switch to a different layer, represented in a different color. Layout and routing are the most time-consuming tasks, and you may need to adjust and redo things until you're satisfied with the result. Sometimes you may change the schematic to an equivalent but easier to route solution. You can also ask the EDA to fill in a given area, which will do it for you, avoiding unwanted cross contacts. When you're done with routing, you can do DRC or design rules checks. These include checking that components don't overlap and that you didn't miss any connection or connected to nets that should be separate. Once your DRC checks pass, it's an excellent chance to clean up your silkscreen. Is each component label visible and useful? Do you have connectors that could use some labeling about orientation? You can add text and drawings anywhere on top of the solder mask. You can also do a 3D preview of the board and see if it looks fine. By this point, you're done with the design, and you need to send this design to the manufacturer next. Unless your EDA has direct ties with the manufacturer, ECDA does, you need to export your design as a collection of standard format files that most manufacturers can use. The files are called Gerber files, which describe copper layers, cutting, solder mask, silkscreen, and so on, and drill maps with the position and sizes of holes. Your manufacturer will provide recommendations on export settings for Gerber files, and then you can put all this into a .zip file and send it to manufacturing. There is also software that allows you to preview the Gerber files for a final checkup. You're ready for manufacturing. I've looked at two popular providers for hobbies, SHLC PCB and PCB Way. I've only tried the former and had a good experience. From a quick look, PCB Way seems slightly more expensive for small prototypes, but they have more manufacturing options in terms of materials, colors, board thickness, and so on. Still, the process seems quite similar in both. You start uploading the Gerber files, and that will configure layer count on the dimensions. It's worth verifying those. Then you can pick the quantity. The minimum here is 5 boards. You can also select the thickness, the solder mask color, and a dozen other options explained there. But for most simple hobbyist projects, the defaults are fine and cheap. The only value I changed is the copper finishing. The raw copper is fragile and a bit harder to solder to, so it has to be covered by something else. The default option is to cover it with an alloy containing lead, so I prefer to pay a bit extra to avoid the brain poison in my PCBs for just a few pence more per PCB. And then you pick a shipping method, which is cheap and slow or expensive and fast, and they start manufacturing. That typically takes 1 to 2 working days, so most of the wait time to get the PCB at your home will be shipping. Based on all this, you'll get a quote. For this board, the total cost was less than £5 for the set of 5, including shipping. And it took a bit less than 2 weeks to have them by my door, ready for assembly. This video is already too long, so I'll discuss soldering components in the future. But soldering has less of a mystery to it, so I hope this one has shown you that you too can make your own PCBs. Until the next one.